Hello, my name is Rinon and welcome to my guide for the Seat of Sacrifice Extreme, which is the EX variant of the new main story trial added in patch 5.3 of Shadowbringers. This fight requires a minimum item level of 480 and it is going to test your ability to adapt to small amounts of mechanical randomization as well as your ability to remember sequences of mechanics effectively. These strats that you're going to see here are absolutely doable in pug groups, and honestly almost all of the footage I've captured here has been from pug groups. On top of that, I'm also going to provide a macro for use in PF to make things nice and easy for European and JP players that actually use macros. The drops you can receive from this fight are eye level 495 weapons, a new mount, and a standard song and crafting material. One little thing to note is that I took quite a while before I released this guide because I wanted to make sure I had a number of clears with different strats, and I could recommend to use strats that I think are both effective and consistently executable in Party Finder. So let's get into it. The first and second phases of the fight are completely scripted, so I'm just going to talk you through the mechanics that occur in order and tell you how to resolve them quickly and effectively. The first mechanic is Terror Unleashed, which will reduce all players to 1 HP and require them to be brought back up to full HP before the debuff hits 0. If not, they die. Whenever the boss casts to the limit, he is going to generate a number of limit break bars which call for certain mechanics. There are 3 LBs to worry about. He executes the LBs on the limit break cast. These limit break casts are fixed, so I'm going to tell you what to do for each one as it becomes relevant. He will always channel LB3 first. Next up comes Solemn Confitia. Whenever you see this mechanic, try to stack up as a group directly under the boss or on the butt. Large AoEs are going to be dropped under each and every player for you to dodge out of. Following this, absolute stone 3 markers will be put on each player and the cast bar will happen. Spread around the boss into pre-assigned positions to instantly resolve this. You'll see it's an Earthshaker mechanic that you may be familiar with from many other fights. Next, he casts Limit Break to execute his LB3, which is Meteor. It's going to target either healers and tanks or DPS invisibly, and in order to resolve this, you must move to the corners of the room to ensure that the damage from the meteors is survivable. To resolve this really easily, we're going to create pairs. Each pair is going to have a tank or a healer and a DPS and assign them to a corner, and this is going to be used throughout the fight for many different mechanics. The next major mechanic of the fight is Imbued Saber. He is going to channel a multiple number of 4 different elements which will need to be handled in different ways. 4 elements are Fire, which is stop moving, Ice, which is keep moving, Earth, which is Earthshaker spreads around the boss, and Light, which is stack. For this first Imbued Saber, the boss will always use Earth first and Fire or Ice to accompany it. The final component of this mechanic is an in or out dodge. When the boss begins to cast Imbued Coruscants, watch his sword. If there are going to be glowy rings around it, it's an in mechanic. If there are not glowy rings around it, it's an out mechanic. All of these mechanics resolve at the same time at the end of the Coruscants cast. So it could be, for example, spread in and keep moving. You'll be given the tells in advance and you'll execute them all at the same time at the end of the Coruscants cast. One thing to note is that if his element is fire, aka stop moving, make sure to stop moving until the pyretic debuff falls off completely, because it hits like a truck, and if you're a DPS and you greed, you're probably dead. He will now channel a Limit Break 2, which is Desperado. This is going to target each healer with a stack damage attack. To resolve this easily, create 2 groups of 4, each with a healer, a tank, and 2 DPS, and have 1 stack on west of the boss and 1 stack on east of the boss. But before he executes this LB, we're going to have to deal with Sword of Light. For this, you want to be watching the outside of the arena. Multiple swords of light are going to spawn and begin drawing triangles along the outside and through the arena itself. There are going to be 2 small safe spots, and determining where they are is actually very easy. The swords are going to draw lines across 3 edges of the arena completely. All you do is immediately move to the edge of the 4th side that has not been drawn and stand slightly to the left or the right of the centre of that edge. A stack damage is also going to go off here, but the damage is not very high, so please don't worry too much if 1 or 2 players miss it. if you're caught inside the patterns drawn by the sword when they execute, you will instantly die, so don't worry about losing a little uptime to make sure you do this mechanic properly. Following this, the Warrior of Light will execute LB2, so deal with it. Immediately after this, LB1 will be channeled. LB1 is Braver. This attacks a random member of each role with a cleave. To resolve this mechanic easily, have both tanks stack on the front of the boss, all 4 DPS stack on the butt of the boss, and the healers stand on their own in their normal west-east positions. Following the channel of LB1 will be the second set of Imbued Saber mechanics, and it's important to note that this pattern will always be the opposite of what you got last time. There will always be a light mechanic, which is a stack, and then whichever of fire and ice and in or out that you didn't get before. So if before you got fire, out and spread, this time you will get in, ice and stack. Very, very simple to deal with. It's handled in the exact same way, and at the end of this, the LB1 mechanic will be executed. Many of these mechanics are recurrent for the rest of the fight, so make sure to learn the animations, patterns, and be comfortable with them. After all of this, watch for the cast bar of the bitter end. This is a tank buster, and you will need to tank swap afterwards as it applies a vuln to the tank. Summon Worm is the next ability to watch out for. A red Bahamut will spawn on the north side of the arena on either west or east and will shortly dive through the arena. Stay stacked and then watch as the Confiteors spawn beneath you, move to the side away from the Bahamut, and then one player will be targeted by an absolute flash marker, which is a little eye marker above their head. This is going to execute a gaze attack from them, and I would recommend they move behind the boss and the rest of the players can stay on the butt as normal and keep DPSing, and everything's all good and it will auto-resolve all of these mechanics. Then there is going to be an Eld Dragon Dive, which is a heavy raid damage, and following this, the Warrior of Light is going to cast Spectre of Light, which will spawn adds and signify the end of the first phase. There are 2 adds that will spawn, a Warrior and a Dark Knight. Have one tank take each add and pull them slightly apart. I'm going to split the mechanics of this phase up by role to make them very easy to execute and understand. Tanks. Blade of Shadow and Fatal Cleave are tank busters. Cool down them because they hit quite hard. 2 towers will spawn near the centre of the arena. Each tank will stand inside the one closest to them, bearing in mind not to let the 2 adds tether. Deep Darkside and Berserk will cast. These need to be interrupted. Once these mechanics are done, deal with tank busters and kill the adds. Healers. Start the phase on the far west and far east side of the arena and mitigate the group before mechanics occur. Soon, you'll be targeted by stack markers, which you will want to take in your current positions with the 2 ranged players, 1 on each side, making 2 pairs. After these stack markers and the towers in the centre resolve, they resolve at the same time for the record, you will grab 2 of the dragon tethers that appear respectively and face them into the corners. From there, heal and DPS until the phase ends. DPS. At the start of the phase, each DPS will get a flare marker. Use your same corners from the earlier LB mechanic and move there to reduce damage on the group. Following this, the 2 melee position players will join the tanks in their respective closest towers, and the 2 ranged players will join their closest healer in their stack markers. At this point, melee responsibilities are over and they continue to DPS the adds, while ranged will need to move back into their corners, grabbing the dragon tethers in those corners and facing them outside, much like the healers. Following this, you kill the adds before the boss hits 100 on his gauge and you will proceed to the final phase of the encounter. One thing to note is the boss charges an LB4 here and you have to use tank LB3 in retaliation to this to avoid being insta-wiped. The last phase of this fight has a massive element of RNG to it. The Warrior of Light will summon different Spectres of Light of various jobs in a semi-random order. Each job is going to execute a series of mechanics that require resolving to proceed, and the order of the mechanics is random, so you'll have to learn each phase individually and be able to adapt when a phase comes along. So let us talk about each one of them individually. Summoner. This sequence begins with the Imbue Saber, either fire or ice, and then the boss will summon the Summoner Spectre. 4 Bahamuts are going to appear, 1 in each corner, and they will tether players for Flare Breath. Either the healers and tanks or the DPS will receive an Earthshaker marker above their head, a little red marker. The unmarked role is going to run to their pre-assigned flare corners, grab the tether, and face them outside to the corner as you've done before. Those who are marked will rotate clockwise of where their meteor position was into cardinals, north, west, southeast, and stand there to bait their AoEs. After these mechanics resolve, the roles will flip. So those who had Earthshakers will take the tether off their meteor partner and face it outside, and those who had been baiting tethers will move clockwise and take the cardinals for their Earthshakers. One thing to note is that during this phase, Confitia AoEs will target players, forcing you to move around and adjust as needed to avoid the AoEs while resolving this. After this, the boss will summon Worm and a Bahamut will cleave half the arena once again, and at the same time he will cast Imbued Coruscants. To resolve this, check the Bahamut position, dodge west or east as needed, dodge the in and out, and do the Imbued Saber mechanic all at once. This sequence is concluded by a raid damage followed by a tank buster. Ninja, the boss will channel Imbue Saber for either a stack or an Earthshaker before summoning the Ninja. The Ninja Spectre will cast a tidal wave on either the west or east side of the arena. Shortly after, Solemn Confitia AoEs are placed under each player and a stack marker is placed on each DPS. The tidal wave knockback will resolve and then the stack markers will resolve shortly afterwards. My personal recommendation is to use knockback immunities for this and stay in the middle of the arena on the boss, one on the north, one on the back, one on the west, one on the east as per the diagram shown here. But if you want to be knocked back for safety, you can. Finally, he will cast Imbued Coruscants, which is either an in or an out, combined with Earthshakers or stack. Dark Knight. The boss starts this sequence by channeling either an LB1 or an LB3, and then he will summon the Dark Knight. When the Dark Knight arrives, Confitias are baited under each player, and then each DPS is targeted by an AoE. These AoEs must be placed in the furthest corners of the arena, as far away from each other as possible. Use your flare corners for this. They will grow into massive circles, and if the circles touch one another, they will explode and instantly wipe the group. After these circles have been placed, one tank, one healer and one DPS will receive a flare marker on their head. I recommend sending the tank to the north, the DPS to the west or the east, and the healer to the south. Another player will receive a stack marker. You are welcome to send the group into the cardinal corner that does not have a marker in it, but I think there isn't much point because you can take this stack damage in the center completely safely as long as you have HP. Following all of this, he will execute his charged LB1 or LB3 and then tank buster. The last specters are the black and white mage. The boss will build up a limit break 2 or 3, and then 8 towers will spawn around the boss, one after another. Each one needs to be soaked by 2 players, and doing this will inflict a 10-second fire resist down debuff. You cannot safely soak a second tower while you have that debuff. The way we chose to resolve this was to give each role a number. Tanks are 1, healers are 2, melee are 3, ranged are 4. So from the 8 towers, tanks will take 1 and 5, healers will take 2 and 6, melee will take 3 and 7, and ranged will take 4 and 8. Just count the towers as they spawn and move into position accordingly. After this, the boss will summon Worm once again and Bahamut will prepare to dive bomb. The boss will also cast Coruscants, so you will do a move in or out and a west/east dodge. After this, he will limit break again, casting either Meteor or Desperado. There is one last mechanic to worry about in this phase, which is Quintuple Cast. Quintuple Cast builds upon many of the mechanics you have already learned earlier in the fight, and in my opinion results in a really fun dance of randomized mechanics that is going to test your memory. Quintuple Cast will execute the following mechanics in a random order: spread, stack, stillness, move, and gaze. Every pull can be different here, and honestly, there isn't too much special to say or any unique strategy to get through it easily. This is a test of your attention and memory, and I recommend just playing as safe as possible for this mechanic. I like to deal with it in pairs, so say if it's a still into a stack, I'll stack in advance, I'll go still, and I'll just wait for both to resolve, and then say there's a move and a gaze, you keep moving, look away from the gaze, and then you can deal with the last mechanic. Following this, Swords of Light will once again cast in the exact same way as before. Try not to let yourself be caught off guard by this, as it can be tough to notice the sword spawning, having just come off of dodging Quintuple Cast. The main difference to this Sword of Light, however, it moves quickly and you will need to get into position as soon as possible. To learn this fight effectively, I would recommend breaking it down, learning individual mechanics, becoming comfortable with them, and memorizing their cast bars and assigned heroes rather than learning a timeline, because this is going to allow you to adapt more efficiently. Once he has gone through all of the heroes and Quintuple Cast, he will enrage. Additionally, if you try to DPS LB the boss when he has LB of his own channeled, he is going to use Hallowed Ground, and it's going to invuln your LB. Make sure you time your LB efficiently to avoid this. So, I hope this video helped. I tried to break it down and get through it quickly rather than spend 30 minutes talking about the mechanics. I hope that you can still understand what's going on and you're able to get through and get that clear efficiently. If it was helpful, it would be really helpful to me if you would like and subscribe. Thank you so much. I hope you all have a wonderful day and you get those eye level 495 weapons soon.